Okay, so you've been telling me these articles, these devastating wildfires in California, right?
Hmm.
And, it's obviously a horrible tragedy, all that damage and people losing homes and all that.
Yeah.
But you're also kind of digging into some dupper stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
divine intervention. Is this a sign or a message or something
Uh,
like that? And, I got to say, that's a pretty interesting question to think about.
yeah,
And you've actually given me some really good stuff to go through on this. Articles about the fires themselves, obviously.
of course.
But then also like some philosophical essays on divine intervention, even some theological texts about how fire is used as a symbol and what it represents.
Hmm.
So I think we've got a good basis here to really deep dive into this question. Could these fires be, some kind of message from above?
Yeah, I think it's a question that a lot of people ask themselves,
Right.
especially when faced with something so large and so impactful as a natural disaster.
Yeah, it's like looking for a reason or trying to understand why this is happening, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that really jumped out at me from one of these sources was this idea that, okay, if you believe in God,
Mhm.
if you believe that he created the universe, then natural disasters, could they be like a tool for him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like nature itself is part of the plan.
Right, exactly. So like it's not
It's not
necessarily
a separate thing.
right. It's not a separate thing. It's not just like random chaos. It's
Right.
like this could be how things are supposed to work.
Yeah. And that idea's been around for centuries, you know?
Yeah.
I think about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Oh yeah, fire and brimstone.
Exactly. That was seen as God's punishment for how they were living, you know?
Right, like a wicked society, and the fire wipes them out.
Right. And it's interesting how that story, even though it's so old, it still kind of speaks to us today, you know?
Yeah, like we still use that phrase, Sodom
Exactly.
and Gomorrah, to describe like a place of just like moral decay.
Hmm. And this source was asking, are there modern day Sodoms and Gomorrahs?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Are there things going on in society right now that could be seen as inviting that kind of reckoning, I guess you could call it?
Wow, that's a pretty heavy thought.
Yeah.
And this source actually makes a specific comparison to, Hollywood and says, is Hollywood a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah? And I mean, it's a provocative statement for sure.
Right.
But what does that even mean? What makes a place a modern Sodom?
Yeah, it's tough because what might have been considered wicked, centuries ago could be totally different now.
Right, like times change, values change.
Exactly. But I think the core question remains the same. If you believe in a God who judges, then how does that judgment play out in the world, And are natural disasters a possible way for that to happen?
Okay, so that's one way of looking at it. But then there's also this other idea, right? The butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that? Like how one tiny little thing can set off a chain reaction
Yeah.
and lead to huge consequences.
Conspiracy theory.
Right, chaos theory, exactly. And one of these sources, it calls it the conglomerate theory,
Okay.
which is basically saying that these fires, they're not just the result of one thing, but like a bunch of factors all coming together.
Where it's like a perfect storm.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them natural, some of them caused by humans.
Right. You've got the dry conditions, which are made worse by climate change.
Right, like the kindling is ready to go.
Exactly. And then you add in things like maybe power lines that aren't maintained properly or even arson,
Ooh, yeah, people deliberately starting fires.
It happens more often than you'd think.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah.
And then there's even this idea, which I thought was really interesting, that some groups might actually benefit from all this chaos.
Yeah, like profiting off the disaster.
Yeah, that's like straight out of a mystery novel or something.
Right. It's not just one bad guy. It's a whole web of people and events.
Yeah, and figuring out who's involved and how it all connects, that's like the ultimate detective work.
It really is.
And speaking of mysteries, fire itself, it's such a powerful symbol.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources talk about how it's got this duality to it, right?
Hmm.
It can destroy, obviously, but it can also cleanse and renew.
Right. Think about the phoenix rising from the ashes.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic image.
Yeah, a symbol of transformation, new beginnings.
And even in religious contexts, fire is often used to symbolize purification, right?
Exactly. Getting rid of the old, making way for the new.
So if we apply that to these wildfires, could they be seen as like a symbolic burning away of something negative?
It's possible, right?
Like that source that said Hollywood is a modern Sodom. could this be like a cleansing of those excesses?
It's an interesting way to look at it, that's for sure.
Yeah, but also
Yeah.
it gets kind of tricky, right? Because who are we to say what needs to be cleansed, and what if, like, innocent people get caught in the middle?
Yeah, those are tough questions, no easy answers.
Definitely. And it brings up the whole question of accountability, right?
Right. If there is a divine hand at play, is it just about punishment?
Or is there a bigger message?
Exactly. And that's where one of these sources talks about a call for introspection.
Ooh, I like that phrase.
Right. Like maybe these fires are a wake-up call, not just for, a specific group, but for all of us.
Yeah, like a reminder to look at our values, our priorities, and see if we're on the right track.
To think about the choices we're making and how they might be impacting the world around us.
Yeah, and maybe even to make some changes, right? Like not just to be punished, but to actually do better.
Right. And I think that's a powerful message, whether you're religious or not.
Totally agree. So to kind of sum it up, what we're seeing with these fires, it's not just about one thing, right?
No, it's a combination of factors, natural forces, human actions, and maybe even this deeper symbolic layer.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle with a lot of pieces, and we're still trying to figure out how they all fit together.
And maybe that's the point, These fires, they force us to ask these difficult questions.
To look beyond the immediate tragedy.
Yeah, to think about our role in all of this, what we can learn from it, and what we want to build going forward.
Both literally, like rebuilding the homes and communities that were destroyed, but also figuratively.
Exactly. What kind of world do we want to create out of the ashes?
There's a lot to think about, but I think that's a great place to leave it. If you're interested in learning more about the symbolism of fire, I encourage you to look into how different cultures and mythologies have used it.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a really thought-provoking conversation. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And for everyone listening, keep those questions coming, and we'll keep exploring them together.